the oppressive practices around like neglect, what I'll call healthcare neglect, has got to stop.
Tonight, a report into the death of an Ontario woman suggests unconscious bias contributed to her death.
Because there's a very high shortage of housing. I don't know what the waiting list is for housing, but there's a huge demand for them.
Plus, there are high hopes up in Iqaluit for a much-needed elder center.
When you've been in a colony, it's like you feel under pressure, and we have been industrialized so fast that it's like our culture hadn't been able to keep up.
And an Inuk creator shows the world her world, Greenland. Good evening, Tanse Anin. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. The federal government has formally apologized to the Williams Lake First Nation in British Columbia after a historical wrongdoing over a century ago. APTN's Tina House has this story.
This past weekend, Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations Gary Anandasangari was in Williams Lake to finally make amends.
The government of Canada accepts responsibility for this historic injustice and expresses its deepest regret and sincere apology to the people of Williams Lake First Nation for the harms suffered by being unlawfully and wrongfully dispossessed and separated from the village lands.
The minister was in the First Nation to right a historic wrong. In 1861, the federal government removed the Williams Lake First Nation from their village. That forced members to live in the surrounding mountains for years, sometimes homeless. The former village is now the city of Williams Lake, and another site was chosen in the early 1870s across the lake as a reserve for the nation, now known as sugarcane. Along with the apology, the federal government will also provide $135 million in compensation to the community. Cookbee Chief Willie Sellers says he's grateful to all the past leaders who fought hard for decades in Supreme Court to finally get this justice for what was done so long ago.
It was a big moment for us. A very emotional day, a lot of work, and a lot of those elders aren't here that helped us win that case. And we start thinking about celebrating and holding up the legacy of those individuals. We can't help but get emotional thinking about all the work that they did so that we could be here.
Cookbee Sellers says he's excited for the future.
Our generations from here on out are going to be taken care of. We put that money into a community trust, and really nothing is out of the realm of possibility for the Williams Lake First Nation. We're going to be able to do some really great things. Along with the compensation, the Williams Lake First Nation can also add an additional 1,400 acres onto their current reserve land. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Well, we want to hear what you think about the compensation and amends being made. Here's how to continue the conversation. To read and watch our stories, you can go to aptnnews.ca. And if you have a story you want to share, send us an email to news@aptn.ca. You can find us online on your favorite social media sites, including TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and X, previously known as Twitter. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. A final report into the death of a 24-year-old Indigenous woman who died in the St. Catharines Hospital emergency has been released. Heather Winterstein died of a strep infection in December of 2021 after repeated attempts to receive care. The final report is the result of an independent panel that reviewed the circumstances around Winterstein's death. It suggests that an unconscious bias contributed to her death, and that Winterstein was labeled as experiencing both homelessness and addiction. According to the report, a lack of participation from the Indigenous community made it difficult to determine if Winterstein's care was compromised because she was Indigenous. Wendy Sturgeon, the executive director of the Niagara chapter of Native Women, had this to say.
The the oppressive practices around like neglect, what I'll call healthcare neglect, has got to stop. It's got to stop, right? One of the other great things about the report is, again, it clearly identified racism and discrimination. And that was plain to see in the report. So it is a system-wide issue. It's a Canada-wide issue, as I'm sure APTN knows. And the murder by omission is what I'm calling it, has to stop. And there has to be some action taken to ensure that.
The Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations is calling for the resignation of the entire National Parole Board of Canada after the convicted killer of a First Nations woman was released on parole. Kenneth McKay was sentenced to life in prison in 2000 with no chance of parole for 25 years. McKay sexually assaulted, then killed 21-year-old Crystal Pascaman just outside the city of Saskatoon. He was granted day parole in January of this year, despite being considered a high risk to reoffend by the Correctional Service of Canada. McKay was arrested earlier this month in Victoria, British Columbia. He is still in police custody and his parole has been revoked. Neither the Victoria Police nor the Parole Board are saying why McKay was arrested. The Northwest Territories and British Columbia have been hit hard by wildfires this summer, and the federal government has announced some additional support.
In the last few days, we have finalized agreements with both British Columbia and with Northwest Territories, through which BC will receive $32 million and over $28 million will be provided to Northwest Territories over the next 5 years.
The National Resources Minister also says ongoing warm and dry weather could mean that some existing fires may continue to be active into the fall and possibly even the winter. All right, it's that time in the show where we need to step aside briefly, but still to come. A new elders facility hopes to get off the ground in Iqaluit.
We're in the early stage because we're working on obtaining a contractor for the project.
Welcome back to APTN National News. A Northern Manitoba school division says it's struggling with a teacher shortage and is offering incentives for new teaching graduates to work up north. The Frontier School Division is offering new teaching graduates $10,000 a year for up to 3 consecutive years. Around 85% of Frontier's students are Indigenous. The division has 42 schools in remote communities in northern Manitoba. Chief Superintendent Reg Clausen says the shortage is affecting students from elementary to high school, and current staff are doing what they can to make up for over 30 vacant teaching positions.
We combine classes, or we have educational assistants running a class, but one teacher trying to manage 2 classes and educational assistants making sure that students are doing the work. So there's a variety of ways in which we try to negate the impact of being short teachers, but it's difficult and it adds stress on our staff.
A group of Manitoba First Nations leaders are calling for an investigation into what they say is a monopoly over air service in Island Lakes. Grand Chief Scott Harper, along with other area chiefs, are urging Transport Canada to investigate perimeter aviation services for Island Lake's 15,000 members. They say the airline recently increased rates for travel and baggage without consulting or giving notice. The chiefs say the airline isn't meeting the community's needs, and there are continued flight delays and cancellations, which are creating hardships and inconveniences, such as members missing medical appointments.
In the way that we live, and especially in
posts even on social media, pictures of the airline, what they have to go through, and that really does something to the people. How their health and their especially what they see.
The Indigenous leaders say they feel the agreement between the First Nation and Perimeter Aviation's parent company favors the airline and is a monopoly agreement. Now, CTV News reached out to Transport Canada and Perimeter for comment. The Elder Society in Iqaluit Nunavut is looking to expand the number of spaces available to seniors needing shelter. Trevor Wright brings us this.
With Iqaluit's only current assisted living facility having a capacity of 8, the needs are great. The Elders Society of Iqaluit wants to get a 42-unit elder residence off the ground.
Well, because there's a very high shortage of housing. I don't know what the waiting list is for housing, but there's a huge demand for them. And the elders that are currently retiring, like for example from the government, are caught in an area where they don't have a house. They have to vacate their homes, government homes, and need a place to go. Or
once that happens, they either have the choice of navigating Nunavut's crowded housing market, moving to southern Canada, or with family in Nunavut, where overcrowded conditions are frequent. The planned facility will be for elders who are able to live on their own. It's expected to have shared kitchen and laundry facilities, but residents will have their own spaces. They also hope to host a pharmacy, daycare, sewing rooms, and a country food outlet, among other amenities.
We're in the early stage because we're working on obtaining a contractor for the project. And we are currently trying to secure more funding for it, but the project will go ahead.
They hope the federal government help fund the project once the time comes. The next step, however, is getting the zoning designation changed.
Documents, we have secured the land. We have done geotechnical studies on that. And we had also met with the city of Iqaluit to change their bylaw, current bylaw, so that facility can be up and running in that area.
To facilitate this, the city is holding a hearing next week to collect comments from the public if this is something they would like to see. Flaherty says this project is very much in the public interest, giving a respite for elders from Nunavut's housing crisis.
It's very, very needed right now. There's a lot of homelessness or moving from one relative to another, couch surfing, what you might have in that, but it's really, really needed. There's a huge shortage of housing, especially a lot for elders who are leaving the workforce in that.
Trevor Wright, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
One of Canada's historic landmarks was vandalized over the Labor Day weekend. The incident happened September the 2nd in Ontario's Bon Echo Provincial Park, about 200 kilometers west of Ottawa. Ontario Parks was notified that the Mazenah Rock had additional carvings in the face of the cliff. It is believed a stone was used by individuals to mark names near ancient Indigenous pictographs. Ontario Parks is calling the act, quote, disrespectful and destructive, and says the incident is now under investigation. The trial over the Freedom Convoy that ground the city of Ottawa and Parliament Hill to a standstill continued in Ottawa today. The Crown planned on calling 5 Ottawa residents as witnesses, including one resident who filed a class action lawsuit against protest organizers. Lawyers for defendants Tamara Litch and Chris Barber are trying to block them from testifying. 4 business representatives were also expected to speak about how the February 2022 demonstration affected them.
It's been a long time.
All right, it's time for one final break here, but we still have a few more stories to come, including a remote YouTuber drawing a huge crowd to her channel.
There's even people who don't know that there are people living in Greenland.
Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. During a sunny day in Thunder Bay, Ontario, Gene Bushkagan wanted to share this work of art that he painted himself. That's a great piece of work there. Gene, thanks so much for sending this in. For the chance to be our next photo of the day, you can send your photos to share@aptn.ca. All right, now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Beginning on the East Coast, to 16 in St. John's and 23 in Halifax. 17 in Happy Valley Goose Bay, and 14 in Cartwright. 20 degrees in Quebec City and 22 in Montreal. 21 in Toronto and 23 in Ottawa. 9 degrees in Wawa and 16 in Thunder Bay. 19 in Churchill and clear and 17 in Norway House. 17 in Clear and Barons River and 19 in Winnipeg. 23 in Regina and 25 in Saskatoon. 21 degrees in Buffalo Narrows and 23 in Stony Rapids. Continuing west at 23 in Fort McMurray and 24 in Grand Prairie. 24 degrees in Red Deer and 29 in Medicine Hat. 18 degrees in Vancouver and 16 in Campbell River. 16 in Prince Rupert and 21 in Fort Nelson. Mix of sun and cloud and 12 in Beaver Creek and 15 in Whitehorse. 22 degrees in Fort Simpson and 21 in Norman Wells. 19 degrees in Inuvik and 18 in Colville Lake. Cambridge Bay is looking at 1 degree and 4 in Chesterfield. 1 degree in Gloolik and 5 in Kingite. A content creator on TikTok is making a big impact through educational videos about her culture and the world's largest island, Greenland. Sav Jonesa has more.
An Inuk content creator from Greenland is making sure the world knows the truth about her home country.
Every time I go to new places, I just realize that people have no idea about anything about Greenland. There's even people who don't know that there are people living in Greenland.
Kupanuk Olsen is the creator of Q's Greenland, a TikTok and YouTube channel with over 500,000 followers across platforms. Her videos focus solely on Greenland, a country colonized by Denmark, and her Inuit culture.
It's important because we want our voice to be heard as well. When you've been in a colony, it's like you feel under pressure, and we have been industrialized so fast that it's like our culture haven't been able to keep up. So I think it's important to show our culture, to tell our own story, and change the law regarding to our own needs instead of the European or Danish law requirements. Because the cultures are so different from each other.
Though politically considered European, Greenlanders migrated to the island through Canada for thousands of years. Cultural elements like language and Arctic cuisine are relatable for her many Inuit fans in Canada.
We have the same way of hunting, the same way of understanding the nature, being one with the nature, and there's so much of our expressions with no and yes, with our facial expressions, with our culture, they're the same. So we have so much in common, and our languages are almost the same because it comes from the same root.
Today we are comparing our Inuit language between Nunavut and Greenland.
With over 400 videos made and millions of likes and views, her internet fame is catching up with her in real life.
I've become really, really famous in Greenland. That is a bit annoying at the moment. I can't go out my door without being recognized. So I'm actually thinking to buy some caps today so I can just hide a little bit more. I'm getting so much attention at the moment that it's getting a bit difficult.
But Olsen says no matter where her videos may take her, Greenland will always be special.
I've traveled to so many places around the world and realized how lucky I actually am, because our nature is so beautiful. We can go out hunting. We can feel like the Aboriginal feeling we all supposed to have as human beings out in the wild. So we still have that here. So we are pretty lucky.
Sav Jonesa, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Great story there. Well, Well, it was recently International Literacy Day. The Council of the Federation Literacy Award hands out one award to a winner in each province and territory. An illustrator with a spark for helping children and youth to engage with traditional languages is being honored in the Yukon. Our reporter Sarah Connors has this.
Illustrator Susan McCallum's life passion is to help keep First Nations languages alive and thriving. And she's done just that. The artist has illustrated dozens of First Nations children's books in several Yukon First Nations languages during her 40-plus year career. Her dedication to language is why she was chosen for this year's Council of the Federation Literacy Award.
My heart is full. It's wonderful.
McCallum says her interest in promoting language was sparked by a quote she included in her first pen and ink drawing.
I read a quote from Tigani Nani, and the quote is, when people live far from the scenes of their great spirit's making, it's easy for them to forget his laws. So that's when I first started illustrating Indigenous languages and learning so much on how to respect the land from an Indigenous point of view.
We actually have Southern Shoshone speakers here, if they would like to come up now.
With language at the forefront, McCallum wanted to share the stage with young speakers. All spoke of how her work helped them on their language journey.
I'm grateful for all those illustrations that you drew. It's beautiful artwork and it helps me understand Duncan.
In addition to illustrations, McCallum is the creator behind literacy board games, flashcards, and curriculum. More recently, her illustrations were included in the Han language book Shutzi, My Grandpa. Author Georgette McLeod says it's important for young readers to see themselves in the artwork.
You can pull images from there of people's lives at fish camps, at hunting camps, in school, in the communities. I think people really feel that they can connect in that way, and not only just little ones, but adults as well.
As this year's winner, McCallum received a certificate signed by the Premier. She was also awarded a Council of the Federation Literacy Award medallion. She's hopeful her work will help promote language and literacy across the territory.
You have to implant that in them, that there are going to be speakers. There are speakers right now. And the more you speak and your friends speak, it's just going to grow and grow and grow. So it's so important.
Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
And that's a great story there. A couple of great stories to end our show tonight. That is all we have for you this evening on APTN National News. For more Indigenous news, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. For all of us here, thank you so much for joining us. Miigwech, Kinanaskmatin, and have a great evening.